Okay, so that forces us into, once again, this thinking of scale positions and having to change our scale position. And that means that every time I change a chord, even though I'm in the same diatonic notes, I have to then think of it from a different numbering system perspective. That's going to be one of the major issues. Now, again, you can follow my logic in terms of how to deal with that issue, but at the very least, I think we should be aware, you have a better awareness of the issue and the way the system is forcing you to think kind of that way. And then what do you want to do about it? Should you change it or not? So we have the dual interval naming. We will use both relative names, e.g. major third, minor sixth, and distance-based labels. So particularly on the guitar, one thing I think we can do that's again, just objectively better, even if you use the same interval names, the interval names in the normal system being based on the idea that the major scale is the scale that everything else is created from, which isn't exactly true. If we built the system now, all the scales would probably be relative or the same, because they're all connected to each other. But that's the idea and then the minor scale is the second best scale, and all the other scales are kind of are lesser importance. So all the intervals are named on the major and kind of minor scale. So we have that. But even if we use that system, we can at least say, look, this is a major third. I'm going to call the major third a 4-note away major third. So when I'm on the piano and I can't see on the guitar, I can't see the actual distance for a major third, I can at least say it in my mind so I can remember the actual distance in half steps, which is our primary measuring tool. That would be like inches or centimeter, right? So we have the directional intervals. Directionality will be introduced. So in other words, notice that when we look at distance, even on a piano, distance goes both ways. If I start on a C, I can go to the right of the C, up pitch-wise, and I can go down as well. But notice the way our interval system works, it's as though we can only go in one direction. So if I go from, say, this G up to here, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, a major fourth. So it's going to be a 4-note away major third. 4-note away major third. But what if I go from this note back to this note? I would count it, hey, look, that's going to be 2 notes back. But there's no real interval for 2 notes back. And the reason for this is when we start to envision like how our system works, we envision either a straight line of notes, they go up in a straight line, or we envision they go around in a circle. There's 12 notes like on a clock. In actuality, it's more like a spiral. They go up and repeat pitch-wise in a circle. So what we end up doing oftentimes is we create a system as though we're thinking like just as though they're on a clock, but we're not taking into account the octaves or directionality. So again, it's kind of getting into the weeds to say I'm going to say there's a negative interval. I'm going to say that I think logically that makes sense. I think logically on a guitar, I would like to be able to count from this C up to say like this G and say the distance and count the distance. But that's the negative distance. So then I would usually have to take the inverse. So there's pros and cons to using the system, but that's one of the outliers or one of the things that follows or one of the things I think would be put in place if we've thought of the system logically from this point. We'd say, hey, look, there's directionality is a thing. We can go higher in pitch and lower in pitch. We shouldn't have just a interval system based on going one direction like on a clock. So again, I'll talk more about that later. You can accept that argument or not as to whether you want to create intervals that go negative direction. But anyway, model interval labels. So a new system will be used to name interval based on mode identity rather than only major or minor designations. So we might have something like an X4 for the Mixolydian fourth or something like that. So I'll actually then take the next logical step and say, okay, if we were creating the system from today, we wouldn't say, hey, look, the major scale is the master scale and all of the other modes are of lesser importance and therefore I'm going to name all the distances as they are compared to the major scale. We would more likely say, hey, look, it makes a lot more sense to label everything from the relative modal position that we're in. That actually tells us a lot more from the context of the song, and it's more scalable, and so it makes a lot more sense. Now, again, you might say, okay, you've gone too far there. I'm not going to go in and learn a different modal system, but I would make the argument that when you make different chords, we should really be seeing the chords as does it fit diatonically into the scale that we're playing in. And if it does, it's useful to look at it from a modal scale point. The 1-4-5 goes from the Ionian mode to the Lydian mode to the Mixolydian mode, even though you could think about it as going from the one of a C of a major scale to the one of a major scale to the one of a major, right? An Ionian, Ionian, Ionian. But really, you're playing within the context of a song. So by thinking of it that way, you're actually confusing yourself, I think, right? It's actually more easy to think, no, I'm playing around a different node that's in the same master shape. I'm not going to be thinking of myself as in the same, as changing all the numbers within the shape. Again, we'll get into that argument later.